And they already did that. I think this is a bigger push.
Yeah.
I think this is a bigger push. Just my opinion, just speculation. I have no clue. I look at a magic 8 ball at home when I ask a question. So what do I know, right? But it's still up in the air, and it's still yet to be determined. We're talking about this class now today. All the stuff that I'm going to tell you, I have a feeling at the end of the year we're going to have another one of these classes, and we're going to tell you what worked, what didn't work, and where we're going next. Because I don't personally think that anything right now will stay the same.
I think it's gonna flip.
It-
This is gonna go down.
The market is going to dictate what happens after August 17th. The market is going to dictate what happens for the rest of the year. And that's not to say if we have a great selling market or if we have a market crash. I don't think that part matters. The effect to our industry we'll see this year, I think. I think we'll have another course, if not the beginning of next year, just to kind of see how everything shakes out. How we doing?
I'm working on it. I'm trying to cast the screen.
I think you are casting.
Yeah, but it's casting the browser, not the screen.
It's gonna create so much confusion, the court's gonna knock us down.
So it's going to create a lot of confusion. I don't know that the courts are gonna knock it down. I think the issue is going to be so. I have the wonderful privilege of sitting in a room of very smart people that work on the FAR bar contract, and we have these conversations and. If you sit in the room, half of these people are appointed realtors, half of them are appointed attorneys, and you listen to the dialogue about what effect this is going to have and how this is going to change and how our current model, we're trying to force these forms that we're using, and now you're going to have a buyer's broker's agreement, but then you might need to amend it because you didn't know, and it's 9 o'clock at night, and the listing agent can't tell you if the seller is offering any concessions, and so you sign what you got, but then tomorrow you'll come back. But then there's so many nuances, and so you're right, it's going to lead to a lot of confusion. Mm-hmm. But understand the spirit of why this started, right? The spirit of why this started was to give buyers the ability to really give buyers agents the ability to negotiate their own terms, their own compensation. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a bad thing because the world, as we know, buyers don't have no money to buy crap. So we have to keep asking for closing costs and this and that. And that's the real world. Buyers don't have any money.
Price tag. It said that the seller needs to pay 6%, 2%.
It's been like this for
You
120
know the
years.
saying, be careful what you wish for, right?
Listing agreement's gonna be the same.
All these forms that came up now, it's confusing. They all look the same.
Wait till the new ones come out. We have
Make
forms
no sense.
that were supposed to be published that we can't even come to an agreement yet on how to work this out. And so those forms are not gonna be out till, at least at this point, September, October.
And you gotta talk to these intelligent people
I watched
too.
an NAR webinar this past week, and they said the forms are out.
No, yes.
The FAR forms are out. The FAR bar forms are not, because the FAR bar committee has not come to an agreement yet on what we'd like to see. Because, so there's a lot of legal nuances that go on into drafting the forms, and then once FAR bar committee gets a form together, the Florida bar has to approve it and FAR has to approve it. And so we've got easily 6 weeks of waiting time before we can get anything, and we don't have the forms yet that we want on paper done.
So are they going to push the transition dates
No.
out? No.
So what do we start?
Yes,
from
that's the
17th?
good question, right? That's a good question, and nobody has a good answer, right? What I believe we're gonna see in the beginning is a lot of paragraph 20, a lot of your own language, seller agrees to compensate buyer's broker. I don't like that, I don't recommend that, but I know that in the beginning, you don't have the other tools, so you kind of in a position where it almost doesn't matter, you gotta do what you gotta do.
And the buyer can sign like with different agents, because that's what they do here. I'm sorry?
Unless your buyer's representation agreement is exclusive, yeah.
But that's what I'm saying, that's what the buyers do here in Florida. They work with several agents at the same time, separately. And like Marcy
confusing
said,
forms.
they are not willing to pay any commission.
Yeah, I know.
And these
I'm
are
not-
the 4 forms that are very confusing.
and that's why I'm not on the FAR committee and I'm on the FAR bar committee, because I'm not a fan of their forms.
Because these people, if they're so smart and intelligent, They could not see, they all look the same.
They all look the same.
They all look the same.
Yeah, that's it.
So only a nincompoop would not see that this is not the same crap. So they have to come up with something that makes sense to us.
And that's what we're trying to
It makes no
accomplish with the
sense.
FAR
None of
bar
that stuff.
form because of that confusion. So I'll get started. I know the first part of the presentation anyway, and then we'll skip ahead. But understand kind of what the idea was. Remember, you guys, most of you were here when we did our Code of Ethics class, and we got to the understanding that your roles, your jobs, the industry you signed up for, your purpose is consumer confidence in moving economies, right? Your purpose is to get people to have the confidence to spend $300,000 in one transaction on a piece of real estate they don't have the expertise on, right? When people have the confidence to do that, economies grow. People buy houses. You're not spending that money locally, you're spending it when you're doing a real estate transaction. So your jobs really is in essence to make sure our economy continues to grow, because real estate movement is a huge aspect of GDP growth, right? So consumer confidence is all about what we're trying to protect here. Now, bring in the theory that came in, oh, buyers don't have to pay for their brokers. Is their broker really their broker? Those were always in the past the questions that we would ask. If you're being compensated, even though you represent this, right? We were okay with what we were. We understood that there might be a conflict, but we understood that we were able to overcome that conflict. Now introduce this whole scenario. Started with the Department of Justice, who came out and said, you know what, I think that we have an issue here. I think that buyers agents don't really have the opportunity to negotiate, and the reality is they really didn't have the opportunity to negotiate. They were given, I mean, you could always negotiate it, but the reality is if it's a 6% listing or a 5% listing, sometimes you're getting 2 or 3% or 2.5% even, right? And so you didn't really have that ability, and there was a sense of unfairness on all aspects of that. Now, Department of Justice did their investigation, they caught wind of it, they realized how big the number was of the non-negotiable commissions that were earned, and so they decided, okay, well, this is not good. Fast forward to the NAR lawsuits and then to the settlement, and now we're looking at a complete change in how we operate and how we do things. They say it's a minor change because all we're doing is just taking it off the MLS, because you still have the ability, nothing changes as far as your options. You can still negotiate everything you want just like before. The only difference is it's just not on the MLS. You say that's the only difference, but the MLS sells houses, and the only reason it sells houses is because when realtors look through it, they say, oh my God, this one's offering 4% to the buyer's agent? What's that all about? Can I make this house work? And that's kind of what we were trying to avoid here. Oh, we're good? Awesome. Awesome.
Next.
Is that a wireless mouse? You want to walk over here with it? See if it reaches? So we got NAR, and NAR got involved. Mouse pad. NAR got involved. Yep. And so understand the amount of money was $85 billion, right? $85 billion in the pockets of buyers agents that, like I said, moves economies, right? And so we understand that basically through all that, we ended up getting promulgated rules by NAR as far as the settlements go, right? The rules are as far as prohibiting the MLS from disclosing the amount of commission to the buyer's broker, allowing the buyer's broker to mislead the buyers to thinking their services are free. Buyer's brokers aren't free, right? They get paid, but the buyer always thought that they were free because they didn't have to pay for it. We're getting out of that mindset. Allowing brokers to mislead buyers, enabling buyers to filter through the MLS. This was one of the biggest sticking points because, like I said before, if your buyer's commission on the MLS was 1%, the amount of attention you might have put to that property might not have been as much as if that commission was 4%, right? And so we had that issue. So we were going through all of this and through its members in the MLS, and so they went ahead and they said, as of August 17th, we get there, buyers, brokers, fees, we discussed that. As of, we get to the lawsuits, right? The lawsuits allege that the rules created and implemented were anti-competitive. Whether you agree with that or whether you don't agree with that, the reality is there was an aspect of them that were anti-competitive, right? The buyers brokers didn't have that ability. Essentially, the plaintiffs argued that NAR worked with others to ensure payment to the buyer's agent, thereby inflating the amount of total commissions by the seller. And so this whole settlement said, okay, well, we're going to go August 17th. And as we all know, a lot of different MLSs already went live weeks ago as far as taking it off. I think ours took it off as of yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep.
So some, we're not even waiting for August 17th to go into effect.
I think it's August 13th.
13.
Yeah.
And so what was the settlement? First and foremost, let's get to the numbers. $418 million over 4 years. It's a lot of money, and if you don't think that's gonna affect you, let's talk about it again, because all NAR said our dues will not go up for 24 and 25. This is $418 million over 4 years.
Paid to whom? Do we need NAR?
Yes.
Paid to the defendants, or to the plaintiffs, paid to the plaintiffs.
And who are
Sitzer Burnett, and two of the other cases that fell into the global settlement, and then there will be other minor settlements that'll come out from the other
So this
cases.
is not a class action suit?
This is a class action suit. This was a class action certified suit, and this is the settlement that came from that.
3 estates were involved, right?
Oh yeah,
Tennessee.
more than that. Ultimately, it turned out to be almost a dozen. But yeah.
So these 418 million will be paid partially to each seller?
They were going to be, that money will be dispersed. Actual end sellers, class action members, they're not gonna see a lot of that 418 million. Attorneys are gonna see a lot of that 418 million.
Yeah.
The main plaintiffs will see a lot of that money. But overall, the money was just the incentive to settle. The change in structure, the change in processes is what the settlement was about. But as far as the money goes, half of it's going to be paid this year, right? $197 million is going to be paid within 90 days, so by the end of the year. And then by next year, another 72. But don't forget, the third and remaining years are going to be the remaining balance with all the interest and interest on 418 million over 4 years. So, like I said, NAR said that your dues will not go up in 24 or 25. I don't know what's going to happen in 26 or past that, because it's a lot of money, right? So as far as whether or not you're covered within the NAR lawsuit, if you are an employee of any of the defendants, you are covered under the NAR lawsuit. If you're not, then you have the opportunity. You will get a class notice to be a part of the class if you want. And then we get to the settlement in a nutshell. So what are we doing here, right? First things first, eliminating competition requirements, or compensation requirements. No requirement for the listing broker to offer compensation, not even offer compensation. There's no requirement now to do that. Whether or not compensation will be offered now is a question, right? Because when was it always offered? Up front. Hey, I'm letting you know I'm getting this and you can have this. That's what it was always. Now we don't know. And now the problem is you have to get to a buyer to commit to signing an agreement with you, and you don't know how much you're going to be able to recoup. And so you say to yourself, okay, well, I'm worth the 3% on this deal. So any buyer that works with me, whether I get paid for my buyer or for my seller, I'm still worth the 3%. Why should I discount that? We're going to get to it in a second, but you can't agree with a buyer for a $500 flat fee and agree with the seller for 3% and then get the difference. That's not how that works. And so we're going to have a lot of these questions come up and a lot of these roadblocks that we're going to need to amend the agreements at first until we get this all figured out. Realtors and MLS participants cannot make or disclose any compensation offers on the MLS. Concessions are different, but compensation is not. All those fields are going to be removed, if not already, and then NAR will not support any non-MLS mechanisms for making compensation. In other words, they're staying out of it. If you want to Facebook each other for compensation, they're out of that picture. So,
Can I ask a question?
yeah, by all means.
How about the listings that I got before that it's already on the MLS offering compensation? Do I have to
Right.
remove that?
It's gonna be removed.
Not affected. You have a listing agreement
Yeah.
that says.
No.
The field is gone.
The field is gonna be gone on the MLS.
And
So
if you
it's-
have any active listings that happen to have it in the notes, then you should remove it.
Okay.
Yeah, you should remove it.
As of August 17, it's gonna, that section is gonna be removed, so it's no longer gonna be able to be viewed or seen on the MLS. The section where it says no broker, transaction broker 2%, 3%, whatever, that's gonna be removed. Whether you represent you're on the listing side, that's just automatically gonna be removed on the MLS. But I would recommend to go in there on your listing to start removing them now. Okay, start removing them now, and so that way it's just not on there.
Okay.
But can you
Right,
say,
but her listing agreement still remains the same, the compensation.
closing costs? Can you put
That's
it on?
concession.
Closing costs, concessions you can.
Concession, 2% closing
And
costs,
so that's
2%
the
closing
thing, and in back to kind of where we were talking before, sellers are already gonna say, hey, I'm giving a concession. Now I need to give a concession plus that person's realtor's commission. I think sellers are gonna take advantage of this opportunity to say, I don't have to pay 6% anymore, plus $10,000 because of the inspection, right? I can give them $10,000 and say, good luck to you, and go figure it out. And if you don't want my house, we've gotten very comfortable, especially down here. If you don't want my house, somebody else does, right? And so I think the whole mentality in that shifts. And so where are we now? Buyers will need to sign written agreements before touring homes. And that statement is a loaded statement, and we're gonna go through every word in that statement in a second to discuss exactly what that means.
Probably they're gonna provide this new form
It's
that
there,
we
right?
approve,
It's there.
but it's not approved by the bar.
The FAR forms are fine, and you can use the FAR forms. FAR bar forms haven't been approved or published yet.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the agreements have to specify the compensation details clearly, and it cannot be open-ended, yes.
What about rentals?
Same.
Yeah, I was
Rentals are the same? That's
Yeah.
not what I heard.
Rentals
From
same.
one
Rentals
webinar.
is
it's the same. I was
The
on the
only
town
thing
hall meeting
different
last
is
week.
commercial.
Commercial, I was just gonna say, commercial rentals and commercial purchases are gonna be excluded. Residential, they are looking at everything being the same.
So commercial, you can list the MLS compensation?
You should be, I don't know, but you should be able to, because that wasn't affected, that wasn't removed. Commercial's the wild, wild west, you do
We have
whatever
to
you
have
want.
rentals signed each time before we show something, they have to sign.
Before
But
you-
they'll pay the commission.
Before you tour, right? And so that begs the question, who pays, right? You're still entitled to your compensation. Same idea in that transaction, right? And so we'll get to that in a second, but understand here, your compensation can't be open-ended. You have to specify what that compensation is going to be. It can't say whatever the seller is offering. You just can't do that. Truthful representation of your services. You no longer say, I work for you for free, because you don't. Disclosure to sellers. You have to get and disclose, you have to get approval and disclose to the sellers any payment or offer to a buyer's representative, right? It has to be disclosed. You have to get approval. It's going to have to be signed by the seller as well now. Buyer's commission disclosure. Inform the sellers and buyers that your commissions are negotiable. All the new forms are going to have that in bold. You're not going to have to worry about that part. This must clearly be stated in the listing agreements, buyer agreements, pre-closing documents. If not the government specified forms. All the new forms will have that language. Like I said, we can no longer filter or restrict MLS based on compensation levels. That's going to change everything because, are we really now going to look at houses depending on the criteria that they wanted as opposed to compensation? We're going to find these houses. But now that you're worried about your compensation, right? Every part of this triggers another aspect of the ripple effects of what's going to happen. So all the inconsistent rules are going to be rescinded. Don't worry. They're going to develop a ton of education material. Don't worry. That's going to cost money too. Thinking about your fees. MLS compensation off the MLS compensation offers can still be made. And they want to emphasize that everything that was available before as far as compensation is still available, just not through the MLS.
Question
Yep.
before you go ahead.
Yep.
If seller agreed to pay the buyer side now, do I have to disclose it to the buyers that the seller's paying it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the buyers will have to sign. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, one thing that I heard, maybe you're gonna get into that if my buyer signs an agreement that he's okay paying me 2% if the seller is not paying, then that seller is actually offering 3%. But I can only get 2 now because it says 2 on the, that's crazy.
Unless you go back and you have the buyer sign another agreement to amend it.
Okay, so I can't do that.
It's going to be a disaster. You're
But
gonna
then
have to
there
do
are
that at
some-
first,
I
right?
want the 1%.
But what if the buyer says, I want the 1%?
Oh, well, it's 800,000.
You agreed to
I want
2%, you think your services are worth 3, you should have told me 3.
Yeah.
You agreed to 2 and he's offering another 1. Can I just have that as far as more concession?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it should be like this. My fee is 3%. If the seller pays 3%, you owe me nothing. If the seller agrees to pay 2, you owe me 1. If the seller
That would be
doesn't
nice.
agree to pay anything.
But you can't do
You
that.
can't.
You can't do that. That's open-ended. You can't do that. So remember, you could still do
Open-ended if it is on the agreement, if it is on the buyer agreement.
the if-then is open-ended. You can't do the if-then.
Just decide how much you're worth, have all your addendum with the number that you are worth, and have either you buy or you sell or sign, or both signing, and that's it, your car.
That is the absolute solution that I see in my head too. However, you're going to have the hardest time finding buyers, not only to sign these agreements now, they don't want to sign an agreement before they get shown a home at all, let alone sign an agreement and say, I get your services are worth money, and I'm gonna have to pay you unless maybe we find a seller that won't.
See, as a professional, you have a worth.
I agree.
So bring those buyers to your office, give them a presentation of your values, and decide if you want to work with that person.
You see how the whole model changes? We used to give presentations for listings, right? Let me earn your listing. You're gonna need to have presentations. Let me earn your buying rent.
That was originally, buyer's presentation was originally there too, but what happened because of the trend?
But we didn't need to
A lot of
present.
realtors never used it, and that's why this big change came. They were training the buyers saying that, oh, seller's paying it, and that was the mistake, and I think that's why this whole lawsuit, this whole settlement showed up.
It only
the
took
training-
20 years to see this?
Yeah,
Really?
everybody was doing it the wrong way, and now you're required to do what you're supposed to
An
do.
It
opportunity
is gonna be hard, but you
Money.
know what, it's gonna
Yes.
be better in the long run, because the buyer is gonna be, work with you.
It's gonna be better in the long run. Depends on how soon we are not as stubborn to accept the change.
That's what I'm saying, it is hard because the transition, but to be honest, it's gonna be more organized.
I hope,
Me too.
yeah. Or it'll eliminate the whole idea for buyers reps and we'll just have listing agents and the internet.
It's gonna, and the other thing that's gonna eliminate too is the tire kickers. The people that are wasting your time, the buyers that are wasting your
Yeah,
time.
that was the best part.
That's a very good point.
Who you want to work with.
Gonna feel good.
So let me round everybody back together. It's like herding cats. So real estate agents who use and list properties for sale on the MLS are now required to enter into written agreements with a buyer before touring a home. We're gonna get to that sentence in the next slide, but before we do, those written agreements have to include that the specific and conspicuous disclosure of the amount of compensation that you will receive and how it will be determined. Is it a flat fee? Is it a formula? Is it a percentage, right? Compensation that is objective, a dollar amount, a flat fee, a percent, an hourly rate. That's interesting, right? You know what? That's not a bad idea, right? Because I remember people, you could show buyers 75 houses that they don't like. Imagine if you were getting charged an hourly rate, maybe they'll make more conscious decisions over which houses they want to see, right? This goes back into knowing your worth. And so terms that prohibit the agent from receiving compensation for brokerage services from any other source that exceeds the amount or rate that you agree to with your buyer. You can't get more even if they're offering more unless you're having an agreement with your buyer to accept that amount. And then finally, the conspicuous statement that you'll see on all the forms that says that your negotiations are fully negotiable. Embrace that because sellers are embracing that and buyers will as soon as they catch wind.
So what would happen if you sign with your buyer 2%, seller is offering 3%, buyer's like, I'm not changing it, it's 2%. So what will happen to that 1%?
It goes away, seller keeps it.
Seller keeps it.
You'll only get 2%.
Seller keeps it or negotiated the price to go down to your buyer.
There's sellers under no obligation to renegotiate any part of it because of your compensation. That's the issue, right? Seller's gonna say, okay, 2%, here you go. And that's not necessarily a bad thing if you put your 2% and that's what you feel like that's gonna be the market standard, 2 or 3 or whatever it is. the hardest part is getting the buyers up front to understand that they're gonna need to compensate you if the seller doesn't. And sellers are starting to not offer buyers compensation.
Go all the way to 3, it's easy to go, lower than you lose at 1%. Ask always to 3, then if you have the seller is offering less, then you take less. Less than have the feeling that you lost something.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be hard
The
to get
thing
a buyer
about it
to
though
sign
is that
something.
it was never the seller who paid, the seller paid the listing broker 5 or 6%, and the broker cooperated with a cooperating broker and divided that into 2.5 or 2 or 3%. So the seller knew upfront that his agent was worth 5 or 6%. And he agreed to pay that, and the broker is the one, and as per the NAR webinar that I participated in, you have that kind of agreement too, saying it's a broker agreement towards a cooperating agreement.
And so let me hit on that point for a second, because in that room I was telling you about that I sit in, I am a very, very small minority of opinions about this. I don't care who pays the buyer's broker. Ultimately, this is a buyer's obligation of debt. So if the seller pays the buyer and the buyer pays the broker on the HUD, if the seller pays the broker directly on the HUD, if the seller pays the buyer's broker and then gets paid whatever it is, it doesn't make a difference. At the end of the day, it's the same as if the buyer was paying off a credit card on their settlement statement. This is a buyer's obligation of debt that they agree to, that whoever is paying whoever, it's on behalf of the buyer. So in my opinion, I don't think that's going to be a nuance that makes a difference. I think ultimately, if you remember and I like to go on tangents, as you can see, but if you remember in foreclosures, that once the banks started saying, okay, well, we're going to waive the balance, that's a taxable event. All of a sudden, you had to weigh $1 million mortgage waiver versus the amount of taxes that might have been. And so the question now is, if the commission check is large enough, and it's being paid on behalf of the buyer because it's a buyer's obligation, what are the tax ramifications of all that? And so I think it goes deeper into that, and that's why I think all of this is going to be updated once we get an idea, because I think that they're not even considering what the taxable consequences to the buyer are to pay a $50,000 obligation on your behalf.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes.
If you're like a listing agent and you want to advertise like postcards, like, oh, I'll sell your house for whatever, can you as the listing agent, if it's not on the MLS, put like, I will do it for 1%, 2%, 3%, can you do that?
Yeah, and you can do anything off the MLS as far as that goes. That's not a problem. Yeah. Yeah, but then circling back to the original question that was raised, sellers used to think their agents were worth 5 or 6%. But was that because they knew that was going to be split with the buyer's agent, and if the seller's agent got both sides, they got lucky and they got their 6. Now that you don't have to split it, we're seeing sellers out there believe their agents aren't worth more than the 3%.
So what happens with the double whammy? What happens if the listing agent also sells the house? Is he or she entitled to a buyer's compensation?
Not if you don't have anything signed with the buyer.
Yeah.
You know what, I think like the buyer is gonna be like more compromised, like after signing some paperwork.
So back on track, we said that every time you are working with a buyer, you need to have a buyer's agreement executed. Every single time, I don't care if you are also representing the seller or not, this has nothing to do with that. And what is working with? Working with is identifying potential properties, arranging for the buyer to tour at a certain time, performing negotiations, presenting offers and other services, as opposed to simply just talking or marketing your service to a buyer, perhaps at an open house, by providing access to the open house. If you go and you bring someone, open the door for them, you are now working with that buyer, you need to have an agreement. Understand that nuance, because it is a requirement now.
At open
Not a
houses
choice.
too, everybody has to sign and.
So at an open house, if you're just there answering questions, you're not working with anyone, that's fine. But if you're bringing someone to an open house, if you start to, if in that line is very thin between answering questions and working with them, and it can transition from one, and all of a sudden the conversation leads to the other, and so you have to always be careful. So maybe now in open houses you have these agreements with you, and maybe now you have to have them sign it and say, you know, let's do this, and I can talk to you, right? And who knows?
Should it be like mandatory to show it to the listing agent, like the
No.
agreement?
No, but it will be necessary. So, and that's another question of who needs to see these documents. The closing agent will for sure to know who to pay when and how much.
This will lead to something when you're doing an open house, somebody walks in, and the seller could just go and negotiate the house with the buyer because you don't have a contract with the buyer, so seller go direct to the buyer and sell the house. So where do we stay with that?
Hopefully you have an agreement with the seller.
No, because you
Sure.
have-
And you're procuring cause because it was your open house.
Yeah,
Yeah, that can be, but the buyer comes in and say, I'll buy direct from you.
no, you can't, you have a.
Usually owners
I mean,
are
that
not in
happened when
open
we
house.
had the contract.
But the seller is.
Oh,
Yes.
I have another question. Let's say you get a buyer who does sign a buyer's agreement, and you show them this place, everything else, and then they decide that for some reason they don't like you, they get another buyer, or, you know, like buyer's agent, they don't tell them that they've seen this house before with you, and they sign another agreement, but they actually purchase it with that buyer's agent. What are you gonna do? Are you gonna run up to them and say, well, you had my signed, agreement here, and are
It's a
you gonna have
procuring
to-
cause case,
Are
right?
you gonna have to sue them?
You're gonna have to go to your association and file a procuring cause claim and have it get escalated and.
Get your commission.
Yes.
NAR
What if,
webinar, you have different
One-
types.
One second, guys, one second.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I plan to do is before showing, so I'm gonna call listing agents and ask them, are you paying or are you not?
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, unless you see about that open house 9 p.m. the night before and nobody's answering the phone and you gotta show that at 8 in the morning because they have to
I
work.
know, but the question is, okay, let's say they say, yeah, we're paying 3%. Where is it in writing? Like before, I've had closings, I printed the MLS sheet. I'm like, this is 2.5 for the title company. Where's it
Yeah,
gonna be in
so
writing?
that's one of the forms that FARBAR is trying to work on to get, right? To make sure that everybody's on the same page. The problem comes in the legal nuances of who needs to sign that form, how do we keep the realtors out of the contract so that they're not liable for the terms of the contract, and there's a lot that goes into it, but yeah.
So
yeah.
how will
For
I
the
know
moment-
that
for the moment-
listing agent is not lying that it's 3% or
For the
2%?
moment, you're gonna have these compensation agreements that FAR gave you that say what the terms are and who's paying what. But the reality is, maybe you have an email for right now. Maybe your email says that until you get that document in writing.
Text be sufficient?
Maybe you have a text. Is anything sufficient?
No,
Only
is
a
it
judge
is
knows.
Is it considered legally, like in writing?
I mean,
If you
it's
have
in
a
writing. You still have to
screenshot,
bring it into evidence. There's still a whole headache of issues that go along with it.
Yeah.
But technically, it's in writing,
Right.
right? This is part of the hurdles. Yeah.
One thing I wanna mention for you guys too, you are not allowed to ask the listing agent if the seller is paying a commission
Oh,
for the
wow.
buyer's agent.
Really?
You cannot ask that question. Because ultimately, because it's kind of steering in a sense as well. Because it comes to the code of ethics situation. If you calling and say, hey, is your seller offering a commission? Now you kind of like steering towards that listing, so you're not allowed to ask. What's going to happen?
Incentives, right?
Huh?
Yeah.
Incentives, you
correct.
have to use the word
So
incentives.
you can use the word incentive,
seller
but you
offering
can't ask
incentives.
what is the commission split? Is the seller offering commission? You
Yeah.
can't do that because some agents, I'll tell you that some agent will report you, and if they do report you by you saying those things, it can affect your license. You can be called with friends. So that's one. Two is incentive is another one. Concession is the key word that you can also ask. Are they offering concession? Throughout that conversation, the listing agent, if they made an agreement with the new rules where the seller is willing to offer 1 or 2%, they will mention that to you. As a listing agent, you are obligated. You can actually inform them throughout the negotiation process. But you, as the buyer's agent, can't and say, hey, what's my compensation? You can't say that because that will put you in some legal issues.
Is this in writing, the new thing? I didn't see that one.
I didn't see
It's-
that
In the
either.
live, couple days ago,
Yeah, but asking for what's the commission's going to be
but they never said
is,
that.
but it's in the code of ethics class.
So all
But
If you
again,
ask that,
we
it's
can add to
literally
the
kind of
contract.
staring.
So delete the word commission from our vocabulary, that's it.
Seller, seller can
Stay
pay,
on compensation or
an
stay with the?
incentive
Correct.
to the buyer's agent of 2%.
It's concession and concession, both concession and incentives.
Delete commission.
Concession and.
Concession is towards the buyer and,
If I call you and say, hey,
and,
you pay commission, right?
Is the seller offering anything?
Yes, but you know, like the agent, you said, you know, is gonna report you, and it's gonna be a word against by word, you know, it's like, it's not enforceable, really.
You know what
Like,
happens?
How are you gonna prove it? Like, you said.
I'm just giving
I
you.
just tried to file a complaint with the realtor
Mhm.
a couple of days ago.
Yeah, prove
With
it.
ANR. They got, 3 days ago. No, I received everything said, we don't have enough
Evidence.
evidence. Just imagine talking, I provide all the evidence. Even John being my, witness, you know, and they say, oh, we don't have enough.
That's common, but I'm just, it's just a heads up to be on the safe side.
Yeah, maybe they're gonna
It's-
record like.
Cover yourself.
They don't care, they just make money.
call a listing agent, and you say, is the seller offering buyer concessions or incentives? And let's say the listing agent says yes. So what are you gonna say?
Can we
Well,
ask how
what-
much?
No, you have to say, well, what are the concessions? If you can't mention
That's
commission
the
for yourself,
that's
like, what is
perfect
it?
negotiation situation. If they say the seller is offering concessions, they will actually, as the agent, they'll tell you what the concessions are. They are obligated to tell you what they are.
Okay,
The
but,
incentive is saying.
wait a second, let's say, the listing agent says, yes, the seller is offering a $2,000 incentive. Well, then can you say,
No,
what is this
you cannot say
$2,000, well, whatever, or 2%, or whatever it is? You have to ask, like, well, what is this concession towards, like me or what?
You're negotiating now. That's what I'm saying. The thing, what I'm saying is here's this. Hey, I just showed you property. Is the seller offering commission to buyer's agent? Now you're not negotiation, you are asking. Oh, you're not? Oh, okay, thank you.
But
That's happening now. So
that's
that's what I'm
allowed.
saying is no, it's not.
Okay.
But that's what I'm saying, you can't do that. But in the negotiation process, while you already shown the property interest, say, okay, what are the concessions? Okay, what are the incentives? Now you are negotiating to the point where you are representing your buyer appropriately at this point, moving forward with the deal, compared to calling and find out what the commission is, and then, you're only for, okay, no problem, and you move on.
Just don't say
That's,
commission
You
anymore.
can
Can be
do it in
writing?
person, not like.
You can do it on the phone or in your email, whatever. It's a negotiation process to the point where now you're actually sorry to take over, but you're actually representing your buyer the right way compared to agents. If you're a listing agent, you have agent calling you saying, hey, what are you offering for commission? Oh, I'm only offering 2%. Oh, okay, and they hang up, and all of a sudden they never showed your property. So you have that's to the point that property could have been the best deal, the best property for their client, but since you're only offering 1% or 2%, they're not gonna show it. You understand? So that's what I'm saying, to prevent yourself in those situations, don't ask those questions, but until you're in the negotiation process, you're moving forward, and that the conversation comes like, now we are talking, deals being done, what are concessions, what are this, and so on.
If you show a house and the buyer says, okay, I'm gonna pay you a flat fee of $1,000 or whatever, and when you're showing the house, you say to the listing agent, okay, is the seller offering any buyer concessions or incentives? And let's say the seller says, yes, I'm offering 2%. Can you get the 2% from from the seller, the listing agent,
You have
or the
to,
deal,
amend
and
that,
also get your $1,000 that you're getting from the buyer, or no?
No double dipping.
Remember this.
Well, can you get the better deal, or why?
If you get an amended buyer's agreement, you have to amend your buyer's agreement.
You have to amend it, but you can amend it.
Add like on the contract, like sellers should be like, as like we always do, like sellers should compensate at 3% as buyers agent. That's it, like,
In your listing,
no, on the contract, like when we're gonna submit the document.
Yeah, there's an addendum.
So
the contract,
this is a good question. The question was, so can we now, in the additional terms, just write in, seller agrees to compensate buyer's broker 3%?
Yeah.
Um,
It doesn't make sense.
let's assume for a second you have your executed buyer's agreement that allows you to get 3% compensation. That is what I predict will be the short-term solution until our forms are pushed out, because our forms will basically do that job without you having to take on the liability of the unauthorized practice of law by writing in an additional term. That's what we're trying to move you away from. And so be careful when you add that stuff, but I predict in the short term that that's what's going to be almost, you'll be required to, because there won't be an alternative other than the forms that were out.
What if you have a buyer and they say, like for example, when I work with first-time home buyers, they're gonna most likely tell me, I only want to see properties that the seller is paying for the concession. So what do I have to do? Just
It's a lot more phone calls, isn't it? It's a lot more phone calls.
You wouldn't know.
So also what I think that we're gonna see sites like Zillow and whatnot that will have offers of compensation that are outside of the MLS. I don't know that that's gonna work, and I don't know that that's a solution, but I think that's one of the steps you might see.
But Zero is connected to MLS.
They pull the info from it. Yeah.
Can we show it to Zero anyway?
Call these listing agents for listing, for like saying, is the seller gonna do buyer concessions or incentives? And let's say they say, yes, they are. Isn't that almost the same thing that you're gonna say, well, let me just show the ones that are gonna be buyers incentives rather than the ones that aren't? I mean, let's say I say.
So understand, going back to the basics, the whole purpose, we are moving away from steering. We are moving away from the buyer's broker's inability to negotiate. We are moving away from, this is what the seller is offering, take it or leave it, right? That is a double-edged sword, because either buyer's reps are worth it and you're worth 3%, or we're gonna find out in 6 months buyer's reps aren't worth 3% and they're gonna disappear. We don't know yet, but that's the idea. We're moving towards that model of, it's no longer who cares what the seller's offering. If the seller's offering you any compensation, that's great for your buyer that they don't have to pay, but you're supposed to be negotiating your value with your buyers. That's why these questions are coming up, because we aren't getting around the fact that the whole model is changing off of just removing compensation from the MLS. And that's where I'm still in the minority, and I think that we're going to see buyers reps disappear. I don't think people are going to pay 3% for a buyer's rep when they can get most of that information themselves online. It's going to be buyer's reps that are at your house. Here's what I can show you, and in your face, and human touch, and let me take you here. And you're going to work a lot for that, but you're going to work a lot, and you're going to hope you get your 3%. But you're going to need to find buyers that are going to agree to pay you if the seller doesn't. So.
It just seems like it's gonna be a lot more work than for a listing agent. So maybe the listing agent.
It might be.
Well, if I'm gonna do both sides, I might as well not do 3%.
It might be, and the market might dictate that.
Can I make a suggestion? Though?
Absolutely.
Until the legal forms are done and we're all set and then we're all on the same page, can you or us as an organization get an email that gives us the same kind of wording that we can use in the time being, so we're all on the same page with that?
Not without exposing all of us to legal liability.
How about suggestions?
Yeah, I can think of a couple of suggestions to maybe throw over here.
I think it would be in our best interest if we had, so nobody's out there as a free agent just doing their own thing.
We think that's the case for realtors in general. The sooner the better. Nobody wants you guys to be free agents in legal drafting,
right,
because it opens you up to nothing but liability. And so the problem with the language that I would suggest is that we're still arguing over the ramifications of my language and their language.
But you just came up with some suggestions. So some of those suggestions might be nice if you sent that out in an email to everybody, so we could still have some of us on.
We could see what we can find out as far as any helpful tips that might help you until those forms come out.
You know, when we have a
If you
buyer
can make
who's
a note of that, we'll
interested
touch base
in
afterwards.
purchasing a particular property, and he says, okay, he signed a buyer agreement saying 3% or 2%. But when we submit there is no double dipping. So when we submit the contract on the additional terms, we say seller agrees to pay buyer broker 3% commission. And the
Concession.
buyer, the seller receives that, he looks over the offer, it's a cash offer, he says, great offer, yeah, I'll pay those 3%. At this point, there's no double dipping, you cancel the buyer agreement.
Well, you
In
didn't, no,
other
the buyer's
words,
agreement will allow you to get that compensation from the seller. You don't need to cancel it.
Okay,
Yep.
so, but anyway, I think until we know what's going on, we should always think of having any additional terms that the seller will pay 2%, 2.5%, 3% to buyer agent.
Yep.
To buyer broker, actually.
And I think in the beginning, that's what we'll see.
Yeah, mostly.
But no.
Two quick questions. What happens if I will to show without that meaning? Not me, but like if they say, oh, I have somebody that's willing to show without having signed, because I actually had a realtor that told me that she's not gonna let anybody, don't tell anybody, like,
Yeah.
what happened, like, what.
So as part of the settlement, NAR is going to have to put in place procedures for monitoring and procedures for disciplinary action. That's part of the settlement as far as that education, monitoring, and disciplinary action.
And then the other thing, besides the additional terms, we could use one of those forms to give it to the seller to sign, like with the contract, so like it would be the additional terms plus one of those forms, like, I don't know if those forms, would include something that the seller could sign saying that they will pay.
No, these are the FAR forms, and these are as far as where the compensation comes from: seller's broker to buyer's broker, same form, seller's broker, different. Yeah, they did a number already. We'll get to that. Yes.
Will the listing agent present a incentive or concession agreement from the seller to prospective buyers, a listing agent?
A listing agent can do what?
We have a transaction and the offer was accepted, or even before it was accepted. Does the listing agent will have an agreement from the seller saying that he's gonna pay X and Z bananas as a concession?
Well, your listing agreement should have your compensation. As far as what concessions are going to be paid, a lot of times that's not until negotiations happen. So it's not going to happen. If they want to come up and say in the beginning, this is what I'm willing to do, and X, Y, and Z, you have that in writing so that you can market the property. But the reality is until it's negotiated now, it's not an issue.
Can you just attach to the MLS an addendum that says that? Not compensation, that he's willing to pay 2% towards buyer's closing costs or something.
Oh yeah, you can still offer, you don't even need an addendum. On the MLS, you'll still be able to offer seller concessions for closing costs, absolutely. That's not an
But
issue.
that can only be used for closing costs.
For
Cannot
closing
be used
costs.
For commissions anyway.
It's
Now,
one of
if I'm
those
showing
offers
5
that you can
homes.
ask the buyer side.
So that's where I was going earlier, right? It is a buyer's obligation. Seller's just giving you a credit towards your obligation.
And then he pays you.
And the question is now we're just going to tie in seller concessions as a lump sum to whatever the buyer is paying. Buyer is going to be paying whatever they agreed to in the agreement.
So on the closing statement, and then it's going to show up, it's a concession from the seller and a credit to the buyer.
In some transactions?
And then it's going to show up also.
So we can tell a buyer.
In some transactions, I can tell you that title companies are going to be doing it different until we figure it out. But in some transactions, and personally, I think that that's the proper way to do it based on the model, but that may change.
Or we can tell the buyers that, look, we can ask, not as commission, you're gonna get this extra money. Then that's the money that you're gonna use to pay me.
To pay me, to fix the roof, to get this, and to make sure that we come into compliance.
Well, the thing is, the more when it's it's gonna give the more for the amount of the house. So, that's why the money he has, so the commission has to come from his pocket.
Oh yeah, and does he have money in his pocket?
Normally, no.
Let's say the buyer says, I don't wanna sign the buyer's agreement thing, like a big house, but I just want you to show them to me. So is there gonna be like a separate agreement, like a showing?
No. You need a buyer's agreement.
Well, yes, but let's say.
Then you can't work with them. then you can't work with them.
I mean, I know, but what I'm trying to say is, let's say they say, well, you know what, I don't know if I'm ready to buy yet, but I wanna look at these houses, but I know I need some kind of agreement, but I don't wanna sign a.
Then aside from wasting your time, you should still have an agreement. You should still have an
It is
agreement.
my understanding there are different types of agreement. There is one exclusive. When you already know the buyer and you say, you know, now that, you know, we've had this conversation, here's my agreement. That's an exclusive buyer agreement, just like an exclusive listing agreement.
Yeah,
That buyer
exclusive.
has
I
to
will have
work
an
with
exclusive.
you
I don't know
unless
what
they
an exclusive
fire you. But to show a house, just to show, you have not an exclusive. Is a different type. I don't know what it looks like, but NAR had that conversation last week. Is that right?
No, if you're showing 5 homes to one buyer, you just need one buyer's agreement.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's not per house?
It's not per house, it's
Okay.
per buyer. So what let's bring this back to where we were before we left off, and as far as when does touring a home get triggered, right? When do you change into the, all of a sudden now you are touring a home? It's when the buyer and or any of their agents at the direction of the MLS participant enter the house, including live and virtual tours. So now even a virtual tour is considered a tour of the house. And the house is a home of residential property, no more than 1 to 4 residential dwellings. So we're taking commercial out of this.
So even if we add like just an MLS search, it's gonna be considering like a virtual tour?
No,
Okay.
no.
But you have virtual tours on your listing, and then when the buyer goes in and look at the virtual tour. So
Now the buyer is touring a home.
But how? It
So,
doesn't make sense.
but for the listing agent, it doesn't matter. Listing agent, no, it doesn't matter. But the buyer's agent needs to now have an agreement. Because now the buyer is touring a home, even virtually.
Oh, so before you even send properties to the customer, then you
Even
gotta
by email.
have that signed.
As a professional, before you do any work, protect yourself. Plain and simple. The doctor's not gonna see you until he knows he's gonna get paid.
I'll
I think that's gonna be like more confidential.
I'll re-emphasize this. The model now is that you're supposed to negotiate your value with your client or customer, and then you're supposed to work. And if you get something from the seller as far as a concession and incentive, hey, this guy's willing to take this much off of what you have to pay. Maybe you want to go to this house, but this house you'll pay more, but it has that pool. You know, now it's that question on the buyer's end of what they're going to do as far as that. You need to move away from the model before of the sellers paying 6, 3, and 3. That model is gone. You might still get 6 because that's what the market might say for a listing agent is worth 6%. Great, but you might not. And so now the model is the negotiations are upfront. We are transparent that this is now a negotiable event. You are not working for free. You will get compensation.
So it's actually good for listing agents,
Yes.
because if you take a listing for 6% and this buyer agree to pay you the commission that you agree with him, you cannot double dip. So therefore, I'm getting my 6%, you're getting whatever you agree to with your buyer.
They're not gonna
So
give you
it's great
6%
for
anymore. Because 6% is over, just so you know.
A lot of realtors feel that 6% is
It's
gone.
not necessarily over.
I have
Can I
a
tell-
seller right now waiting for me because I had to figure out, I told him 6%.
The 6,
And he doesn't know yet.
just to give you
But
a heads up,
maybe it's
6% is
goes to the buyer.
not the norm. When I did real estate, I was getting 8%, 9%,
Yeah, I
7%. It's all due to your negotiation and how you negotiate. So the 6% is not dead, it's on your negotiation.
And I would say, let's assume for a second you sign a seller at 6% and they have their own buyer's agreement that they're paying whatever it is. Understand that part of that negotiations, they're gonna come and say, well, maybe that's where I can get money from, is that 6%. So who knows where that would go? I have a question in the back first.
Yes, I have a question about new construction.
Yeah,
It's gonna be the same? They're not gonna pay commission or?
it depends. Are you working for the builder?
Yeah.
If you're working for the builder, you get exclusions. If you're working as far as a realtor showing those properties, same rules.
No, but wait,
No, maybe.
no, what if you're taking a buyer to new construction? Is that what you wanna know? You're not working for the builder.
They want to destroy
Same thing.
the industry, that's the point, destroying the industry.
Can I ask-
That's people and
can I add a
that's
point?
what.
Yes.
Based on what she just said, regarding the advantage for the listing agent. I mean, we as realtors, we're here talking about this technology, but the reality is that the consumer is the one that dictates what's gonna happen. And today's market, I mean, my clients send me properties through Zillow all the time. They know how it works. And all you have to do is go to MLS, set up an appointment, and now, once they find out they don't need you, because I mean, they gotta pay you in order to open the house. They can go direct to the listing agent. You know, we're trying to save our butts here.
On that point, let's take one moment. Let's take 5 seconds of complete silence, and I want everybody in this room to think of what a buyer's presentation would look like. What are you offering that they can't get elsewhere? And if we can't think of something, now 5 seconds is a short period of time, and maybe you need a month to think about that, but if we can't come up, if at the end of this year, we still don't know what value we bring to buyers, buyer's agents will disappear. Buyers, there will be no reason for a buyer's agent.
That's unfortunate, that's how
In my opinion, right? In my opinion.
Yeah, now that opens another door for like realtors going against, let's say, you know, because the feed comes from the MLS, right? Zillow is like right? So a realtor might say, oh, I feed the MLS, right? I'm not protected because the information is going to Zillow. Buyers are going to Zillow, right? So basically using, you know, whatever I do, and I get skipped in a way, you know. So it's gonna be strictly, you know, seller's agent, 90%.
Well, I've always said to a buyer, you know, don't go straight to the listing agent, because it's a conflict of interest. They're getting 6% or 5%, and you're expecting that person who's working for the seller to be on your side, and they're not going to. Okay, so that was always, why do I need a buyer's agent? Primarily because I am going to do everything for you from A to Z, from showing to closing. And there's so much.
Start making your list.
She just did a buyer's presentation right
Start making your list.
Okay,
That's
so
it.
if you have a listing and you're representing the seller agrees to give you 4% commission to sell your house. A buyer contacts you directly, but they do not have a buyer's agent or whatever. They say, I wanna buy the house. Can you say to the buyer, oh, okay, yes, fine, I will go ahead and represent you too, because you know, you can do that. But now you say to them, I want 4% from you too. So can you get 4 from selling it?
So long as the buyer agrees to compensate you for your representation. Yeah. This isn't anything to do with one party agreeing to pay you, one party agreeing to pay you. This is to do with one party agreeing to pay for the other party's expenses, right? And so that was non-negotiable. 6%, you get 3. And if the deal hurts, you might even get 2, right? It just doesn't make a difference. And as a buyer's agent, you got what you got. Now you're coming into the deal saying, I've negotiated my value. Is the seller offering? And if they're offering more, I'll renegotiate my value with my buyer. But that's...
So you can get it from both sides and that would be okay.
Now, about that thing, she said a while back, like if someone said it's not signing the buy agreement and they are showing houses, it's their loss. They are working for free.
If you don't sign it,
They're working for free.
Therefore, working for free.
They're working for free.
Then it's definitely worth, yeah?
All right, so steering. We talk a lot about steering. Steering got to go away. We have to get it away, and there's going to be procedures in place for monitoring this behavior. I don't know exactly what those are, but don't forget, you are here to put your client's best interest before your own, especially never put your broker compensation before their interest. You never exaggerate, conceal pertinent facts. And obviously, if you do anything to put your interest through your compensation, you are violating your code of ethics and your broker's fiduciary duties to their clients. So what do, right? Written agreements are required by NAR. Start doing them. Start putting them in place. Now, if you're working with buyers, even from before, bring them in and saying, hey, new regulations, new changes, I need this signed. If they don't sign it, no longer show them houses, right? That's the idea.
I do have a question
Yeah.
because it's happening to me right now, and I don't think this deal will close until maybe next week.
Yeah.
So we are off because the seller doesn't want to lower for 3,000, the buyer's asking 3,000 less, right? So I went to the listing agent and I said, hey, do you wanna close this deal? So let's just 5%, and I said, just give $1,000 and I'll tell the buyer to go, I match $1,000. So then it's $3,000, we close. It's just like, no, not gonna lower my commission. So can I just notify the seller that her list?
No, you cannot contact the seller.
It's their way of business.
But I
Nope.
can tell my buyer, say, listen,
You're a
I
lawsuit.
am willing to negotiate my commission, but the other side, they don't wanna negotiate.
You can tell that to your buyer. I don't know it's gonna help
Not to the
anything.
seller.
Yep, that's an unfortunate situation. But at the same time, from the other realtor's perspective, you set a value for yourself and that's your value. Now, sometimes you have to be negotiable because having zero money because it didn't close is a lot less than having commission minus $1,000. And so sometimes you have to do that, but sometimes you play chicken and it is what it is. So that's an unfortunate situation to be in. I always remind people, what's the goal here? The goal is to close the deal.
It's to close
The
deal,
goal
right?
should be to close the deal, but you know.
But you cannot force.
Since a broker working with the buyer cannot receive more compensation than the buyer agreed to, the amount of the offer of compensation is irrelevant to the buyer's broker's agreement. That's what I was telling you before, right? Remember, it is now separate. Your value as a buyer's rep, whether you represent the seller or not, your value as of the buyer's rep is whatever you negotiate with the buyer. And then now if you're going to get more, then go back to the buyer and hopefully they agree that you can get paid more. I mean, I can't see why not, unless they say, how do I get that money? And that's a different story, right?
Explain. Seller's not gonna give it to you. Or I get it, or he's gonna absorb. And if they understand.
So basically, you have to disclose to the seller's agent, okay, I'm making 2%, right, for my buyer.
No,
No, you don't have
you
to
don't
disclose.
necessarily have to disclose, but if the seller offers you 3%, you will have an amended buyer's agreement that,
And spend that.
right. NAR settlement also requires that to the extent that a realtor will receive compensation from any source, the agreement has to conspicuously disclose the amount, and it cannot be open-ended as we discussed earlier. So remember, Article 2 and 12 apply equally to brokers working with sellers as well. Listing broker should explain the costs and benefits of marketing done for a listing, how potential buyers might respond to such marketing. You're allowed to tell them, hey, buyers will be more eager to close if we offer their broker's compensation like we did historically. It's just not going to be offered on the MLS, but we can still offer it, right? So you still have a listing presentation, right? The listing broker should inform the seller about costs the buyer will incur, how the buyer might react to those costs, how the seller can market the house considering those costs. But at the end of the day, the listing broker must not tell that a broker will steer the buyer based on the amount of commission. The more we offer, the more likely we are to sell this house. Can't do that anymore, right? Now you're steering. We're getting away from steering. And so finally, what does this mean? It means that now we get to explain the process to the clients in a slightly different way. We get to tell them that the commissions are negotiable. As a listing agent, you already know that because you're already negotiating a commission. Now in a residential, you will rarely see a 9% commission negotiated because the market dictates that historically it's been around 5 or 6. And so that's what the market allows for that negotiation, even though your hands are slightly tied, right? But now all parties need to understand that every part of this is negotiable. How the local MLS promotes equity, transparency, and market-driven pricing for consumers. Is the MLS moving more towards a Zillow mindset of just market-driven data and analysis of who's going where and how you market that? You need to be able to communicate your value as an agent. You need to be able, if you're going to work with buyers, the best advice I can give you is work on that buyer's presentation. Show your value, because if you can't show your value, if all you say is, I can show you these properties from the MLS, and they say, well, I got that on Zillow. Well, I can set up a tour. Yeah, but there's a button I can click that can do the same thing, right? You need to be able to show, well, I know what this house is worth. I know the school there. I know the crime rate. I know the neighborhood. I know the fact that there's 3 families with young children that are just around your kid's age, and I know that this neighborhood loves to ride bikes, and guess what, so do you, right? Bring value to your transaction. There's a difference between the cold internet, which is just data, and the human touch, which was always real estate, right? And so bring that value is what I would say. Experts predict this is going to lead to a 30% reduction in $100 billion in real estate commissions overall, seller side and buyer side. I think that number is small. I think that number is going to change. But we'll see that, right? And it will push roughly half of the 1.6 million agents out. Listen, when the bottom fell out in 08 and when everything happened then, a lot of realtors and a lot of mortgage brokers and a lot of people that just came into the industry and never took the time to attend a course, to have a discussion, to think about what they should write and how not to get in trouble. Maybe they don't need to be in this industry more. Maybe it strengthens the class that's here. But man, it's going to affect a lot of wallets. A lot of good agents that just can't afford to make a living are going to have to go do something else. And so even the good agents will be pushed out, I think.
Even the NAR, because there's no more pay fees.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, how about agents that have assistants that show homes? I have a buyer agreement with this buyer, but my assistant is the one showing the home.
Yep.
How does that work?
Your assistant is your agent, and that's fine.
Okay.
Now remember, if your assistant isn't licensed, we have that whole you can't open the door for them.
I know.
No, but otherwise, as far as going through and doing everything else and talking to them, it's just as if you were doing it.
Okay.
I would caution you. It's like whatever you're going to sign your name, you should know the work product that was presented so that you don't get yourself in trouble. But your assistant would be linked to you in that aspect. So if you are a buyer and your agent is using the MLS, the buyers will need to sign a written agreement with their agent before touring a home so that they understand exactly what services will be provided and for exactly how much. It's going to be required for both in-person and live virtual home tours. You do not need an agreement if you were just speaking to an agent at an open house or asking them about their services, right? Somebody walks into your open house, says, hey, if you were going to represent me as the buyer, what do you offer? What can I see? Maybe I won't get this house. Maybe I'll get the house across the street. What do you do? You're allowed to answer those questions. That's not considered working with them yet. No agreement is necessary yet. Agent compensation will be fully negotiable again and again, and when finding an agent to work with, they're going to now be asking about services and compensation, and the more savvy the buyers, the more time that go on, they will want to see your written agreements in advance. Every broker is going to have different agreements as far as that goes. Question? No question? Okay.
What do you mean? Oh,
sorry. Go ahead.
What do you mean if a broker is going to have different agreements? I thought we're going to have the standard agreements.
Hopefully, it depends on what your broker adopts, right? Every broker has the freedom to adopt. Now, usually we adopt the standard forms, but if they wanted to change something on there, they're free to do so.
Okay.
Just, it would no longer be the FAR form or the FAR bar form.
Oh, we're not required to use them? It can be just any agreement?
You're not required to. You're not required to, but it is highly recommended. Because it's already been vetted and you don't get the legal liability of what's called the ministerial act of filling out a form. Yes.
Do you think that we still are on a seller's market?
No.
I think that I have been wrong for 3 consecutive years. I think that I have been waiting for the bottom to fall, and it hasn't.
Yeah.
And I can't explain to you why values are still what they are, with rates what they are, and the cost of a gallon of milk what it is, right? There shouldn't be money in the market to buy and sustain these prices. But it shouldn't have been for the last couple of years, and there's still money in this market. And so I don't know. I will tell you, I see market slowdown effects. I see new home construction slowing down. I see builders slowing down. I see lenders slowing down. But I don't see the real estate market yet slowing down. And so you ask me if it's a seller's market. I see now buyers are responding a little less to the higher prices. And so there might be the beginning of a shift here. I can tell you that there are areas in Florida, like Tarpon Springs, where real estate is now not moving for whatever reason. And we're wondering, is that the pocket that starts this whole shift? And so for the moment, in my opinion, yeah, sellers are in the driver's seat. For how much longer? I would tell you not much longer, but I've been wrong for...
Except for condos.
Yeah, now see, condos, don't get me started about condos. I think condos are the kiss of death right now, and if I think they're radioactive, and I don't want to touch a condo right now for the life of me, so, but that's just my opinion.
Me too.
Yeah.
So I have a listing and my seller will pay the commission for the buyer's agent. So I know we cannot put numbers anymore, but under the broker's remark, can I add seller is offering
Concession.
There is no number, there's
To
no.
the agent,
So,
You can write seller is offering incentives.
Yeah.
to the buyer's agent.
No, there's a field
No,
for
whatever.
incentive.
yes.
Oh, there's
on
a field,
MLS
yeah.
for
No,
There's
concession.
a
There's
field,
no-
you cannot write anything
So I watched
concerning.
it, NAR, a couple days ago, they said no numbers.
There's
Yep.
a
But
field
I'm not putting numbers, I'm just saying that
and
seller
yes or no.
is willing to work with the buyer's agent.
You know, somebody asked me, what if I wrote that seller concessions are negotiable? Is that okay? Because I let them know that it's negotiable.
Negotiable means number, but.
I don't know that it is, and I don't know that anyone has an answer yet. I really don't, and that's why I really think that this is going to play out, and we're going to do a lot of things wrong until we figure out what works. Yeah, yeah.
NAR says no, you cannot mention anything, not in document section, not in broker remarks.
Amount, they said
No,
specifically amount.
nothing. You will have a field, yes and no field for
Concessions.
for concessions. That's what NAR said.
I didn't.
The idea is now.
There are concessions, but you cannot put on the, write it on the,
When the updated MLS comes out on the 13th, we'll know for sure.
Yes or no, that's it. Then they have to call you.
You ready to throw another wrench into this? I know we're out of time, but I'm happy to. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac came out and said that realtor concessions will not be part of what's considered CCIs, right? So when the lender gives the loan, they give the loan to value based on the debt to income ratio. And so if the seller is giving concessions, sometimes they affect, depending on what they are, they affect the debt to income ratio. They disqualify the buyer from getting the loan. And so Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac came out and said, well, if the seller is paying the buyer's broker, that doesn't affect the CCIs, it's not going to affect the debt to income ratio. I believe they're wrong.
They're wrong.
I believe they're wrong because of the foundational belief that I don't care who you're paying, it is still an obligation of the buyer. And so we are looking at that, and that position might change. And if it does, that's going to throw everything, because now the buyer's going to need, they only have $10,000 to close with, and they need that down payment. And now they're going to have to budget for your services, and you're going to have to go into this not knowing whether or not, because even if the seller is able to give you concessions, it might knock the debt to income ratio off. And so there's the tax ramifications, the loan ramifications, the negotiation ramifications that are going to change every part of this presentation, I think.
This will cause the prices of houses to come down.
And now we're talking economy, right? Economics, and this will cause housing prices to come down.
Because now the buyer is offering now, he needs closing costs and he needs, not 3%, now he needs 6% in order to pay us, right? And to pay his closing costs. So
How are housing prices going to come down if the appraisal showed the value of the property?
That's why I'm saying.
It's a good time to be in this industry. Oh, yeah, we had a similar discussion on that AI class, right? We had the AI class, and we had a very similar discussion of what this will look like now that AI is introduced in this technology, and what we're doing as realtors to market ourselves and to promote our services and to work better and more efficiently. Man, this is 6 months is not a lot of time, but it's going to change.
Who benefits with this whole thing?
Who benefits with this whole thing? The buyer doesn't benefit. The buyer's agent doesn't benefit. The seller, no, probably the seller. And the only way we know if at the end of the day the sellers will benefit is if the market allows the commissions to remain at that 3-4% max. If they go back up to 6% just for the seller, then nobody benefited from this. Then all that was there was the fact that the government came out and told the world that commissions are fully negotiable.
Attorneys benefit from it, that's it.
They
Just
did,
attorneys.
I don't know that they do anymore.
Well, they got a big
Well, you know
benefit.
how they will benefit because they left something in a contract that caused them to go, us to go into the courts, right? So they can come up again and something else to take the money.
More lawsuits.
That's the whole thing.
If you have a list that is under contract, it's gonna close after the 17th, so it's gonna be okay, the commission.
If you're under contract, I would still recommend that you get your buyer to sign an agreement. I don't.
Yeah, I have this, if you represent.
Oh, if you're fine. You're fine. Yeah. I
But if the seller doesn't agree to pay the commission for the buyer's agent, so he still can change his mind?
Sure.
Because it's on their.
Up until closing, if the seller wants to be generous, sure. Why? There's nothing to force them to change it.
Can they change it now before the law was in effect? They were showing the commission, like I'm under contract to as a buyer's agent to close at the end of the month. So the listing agent can then say there is no commission available, although they were offering commission.
No, that can't change. That can. I'm saying if there was a mutual agreement to amend it. There needs to be a mutual agreement to amend it, right? So the compensation on both sides needs to be amended.
Okay, so this has to stay the same.
Yes.
If the seller offers, concessions, like to the buyer or whatever, but you already have something with the buyer, like, and it's less than what the seller, so who gets the remaining concessions? Does it go back to the seller or the buyer?
To the seller.
Seller. It definitely won't go to the buyer. There's nothing in the contract that says. And remember, your compensation agreement can't be open-ended, so it can't even compensate the fact. It can't even contemplate the fact that the seller might be offering more. You know, we're going to have a lot of these conversations with our buyers that come back and say, hey, we got this offer, great news for you and great news for me. They're willing to pay me a little bit more than what we agreed to. So I just need you to sign this so that you can acknowledge that I'm getting more money. And hopefully your buyers are happy for you and you're happy for them.
I doubt it.
I say hopefully.
Well said.
I've got a question for you. What would be a good thing to be part of NAR now? Why should I be part of Water Realty? Why? What's the good of it?
I would defer that question to NAR so that they can show you the value of what it means to still be a member of NAR. And I would tell you that NAR has guaranteed that your rates for 2025 will not change.
Oh, that would be nice.
I should be a politician. Yes.
I just want to understand the flow of so the buyer signs, like, let's say you find them the property, you submit the regular contract, and then you give this form for the seller to sign, or what happens next? I don't understand the flow.
We don't know the best flow yet, and there will be many flows to go through. What I think will happen in the beginning, you'll sign something with your buyer, and you'll have a conversation. And I know a lot of people are going to say, "Listen, sign this." Some people are like, "Well, what if I have two? One that says $500 flat fee because that's what the buyer, one that says 3%. I'll show whichever." Don't do that. You're going to need to have a conversation with the buyer from the beginning, and you're going to need to say, "Listen, my commission is negotiable. This is the value of my commission. This is what I need to get paid on this deal. You may or may not have the money to pay me. Let's assume for a second. If they say, no worries, I'll pay you. If the seller pays it, great. It's something less I have to pay. A lot of times they're going to say, I don't have 3% to pay you, or I don't have $1,000 to pay you. And so you're going to have to say, well, listen, we need to have this agreement in place. And I'll work for whatever it is. But you're going to have to trust me that if I get a better offer from this seller, and I'm going to have to trust you that we agree to amend this agreement. It's going to be based on trust in your relationship with your buyers, because your buyers can sit there even afterwards and say, nope. Maybe you pissed off this buyer because you were late to a showing, and even though they're buying this house and now you get more, no, that realtor was a moron. I don't want nothing to do with, right? Buyers are very fickle creatures, right? They either love you or they hate you, or they love and hate you at the same time.
Have you ever heard buyers are liars?
Oh, no, I've never heard of that. Yes.
Can you talk about rentals a little bit? It's just,
Yeah, and so the idea with rentals is the same thing, right? And so we are going to get more clarity from NAR on rentals as time goes on. But for right now, the recommendation is being made that it's the same thing. Get your commission agreement signed by whoever you're showing this property to. Make sure that it's known that it's negotiable. You know, if you're looking and your buyer, rental's a little easier, right? Your buyer is going for a place, they tell you I can afford $2,500 a month, and so you can kind of do the math and say, okay, well, my commission on this would have been, so my value is X, and so I need you to sign an agreement with me that my compensation is going to be X, and you're going to have to get tenants that are in there that'll say, okay, now if you get in negotiation with the seller and they're offering that incentive, and you can take that off of your tenant even better, but it's the same model.
Well, where could I put it, because there's no additional terms on the rental.
On the lease.
Agreement. Do an addendum.
No.
Do an
There's no
addendum
contract.
And have this happen.
For the moment, all you have to work with is an addendum.
Yeah,
For the moment.
okay. And,
They pay only like, how many deposits, like 1 or 2, or they doesn't have to pay the commission, it's gonna be less than.
No, same deposits. Deposits and commissions won't affect each other. Folks, if there are no other questions, I look forward to seeing you all in about 6 months.
Where do we get the copies of these forms?
These are your forms. They were printed here. I think that you guys have these from Form Simplicity. These are the FAR forms. Yeah, all 4 of these are the FAR forms.